Welcome to Intland's Word Export Training Part 2. In this course, we will learn about the advanced word export templates, on how to build and how to use them. Before you start this training, please make sure that you have completed the Word Export Basics module at academy.intland.com, and as a result you understand the base concept of a word export in Codebeamer, and you understand the use of merge fields and bookmarks in a word export template. And now let's take a look at the agenda of the training. First, I'm going to explain what is the difference between a simple and an advanced word export, and to make it more meaningful, I will show you a few use case examples on how you can leverage this method and for what purpose. Then, we will study the base concept of the advanced word export template and get to know the elements of it. Last but not least, as an exercise, we will build an advanced word export template together and test it step by step. In part 1 of the word export training, you have already learned how the simple word export works. During that process, you export the content from one single tracker. That source tracker and its items determine the content. For example, down and upstream references and associations of the tracker's items can be exported as attributes. Using merge fields and bookmarks in Word, we can easily build simple word export templates. There is no need for using queries. A good example for simple word export, if we want to export the current version of the system requirement specifications into one Word document. The advanced word export technique is different. In this case, we can export content from multiple trackers at once, and the final Word document can be freely populated with any content from any different trackers in a highly customizable structure. Beyond merge fields and bookmarks, the placeholders have to be defined as template parameters with queries. For example, if you would like to export multiple work item types from the same release, then we can easily accomplish that with an advanced word export template. And let me show you further examples, use cases explained in more detail. In use case 1, let's say we would like to export all design specifications, test cases and test runs that relate to a selected system requirements or multiple system requirements into one single Word document. As you can see in this setup, test runs are not directly linked to system requirements, but leveraging the traceability chain across the various artifacts and using an advanced word export template, we can easily export all content levels into the same document. Let's jump to the second use case where we want to export all epics, user stories, and bugs that are assigned to the selected release. In this case, we are leveraging one of the most important functionalities of the advanced word export, that we can select the initial item that will determine the scope of the export based on the relationship to other items in the project. If we would replace the release item with a configuration item, for example, then we would instruct Codebeamer to export only those items that are referenced by the given configuration. In the last use case, we will use the advanced word export template method to enable export based on the company's preferred project document template, for example. First, we import the template into a tracker where the items will represent the different chapters, like a document skeleton that needs to be filled up with content. The first chapter is a general introduction and scope description for the project. The second chapter item represents the requirements section header, the third, the design specification section header, and the fourth, the verification section header. But the actual content, the actual work items as requirements, design specifications, verifications, live in separate trackers, and these items are linked to the appropriate section header within the first tracker. Using an advanced word export template, we can export these contents from different trackers and merge them into one single Word document with the desired structure. And now let's review the base concept, the main features of the advanced word export. First of all, we can set the initial item or items of the export that will dynamically determine the scope of the export, as we've seen in use case 2. Then, using parameters with queries, we can define different content levels. The different levels depend on each other. In other words, they have to be linked to each other as references or associations. For example, if system requirements are defined as L2 and software requirements are defined as L3, then the L3 content depends on the L2 content. In other words, L3 is the downstream reference of L2. Similarly to the simple word export, to insert the content of the given level into the document, we use place orders in form of merge fields. And to enforce the iteration of the export for each item, we define loops in form of bookmarks, as we do it during the simple word export. This is an example of how the structure of a typical advanced word export template looks like. We rely on 3 building block types: queries, bookmarks, and merge fields. We define parameters with queries that represent the different level of the content, and during the building of the body, we insert merge fields, referring parameters, into the corresponding bookmark loops. Later, I will explain this diagram step by step, but first, let's take a closer look at the different building blocks types. Let's start with the parameter queries. As mentioned earlier, we use these to define the various content levels. The parameter section is usually placed at the end of the export template and is built in form of content control fields. In the parameter section, we always have to define the init level. Let's review it by row. Level description is strongly recommended because if you want to update your template months later or someone else's template, it can be very helpful to know what was the original intention. Name of the initial level. The practice is that we leave the default name init, but you can rename it, of course. The third row, is the most important because that determines the source of the content using a CBQL formula. In this particular case, the definition says that the init item can be any selected item within the release tracker of the Word Export demo project. Last but not least, if you want to put review-related information from the init level into the document, then select the Reviews checkbox. Let me have some additional comments on the init item definition. You have 2 options here. Either you can hardcode what should be the init item, so every time you use the template, the init item will be the same. Or you can add a dynamic variable into the CBQL row. That enables the manual selection of the init item when you initiate the export in Codebeamer, so you can use the same template for different items within the tracker, for example. It's up to you which way you prefer for the given use case, of course. Okay, let's continue the review of the parameter section. Once we define the init level, which is mandatory, you can define additional levels. In this case, we want to put the closed epic items for level 1. We have a meaningful description, kept the original query name L1, that will be referred later in the template body. And the third row is very important again, because that determines the dependency between 2 levels. In this case, L1 depends on init. That means epics depends on release. In the row 4, 5, 6, 7, you can select which relation type should be taken into account when Codebeamer identifies the dependent items and renders them. In the current config, we want to get only those items that are linked as down or upstream references, and we ignore the associations. And we have again the CBQL line where you can define the exact source of the level 1. As you can see with this CBQL formula, I want to get only the closed items of the epics tracker in the demo project. In the last 2 rows, we can set the rendering limit for the given level. Hard limit is 200, but I kept the default 100 value. And now Let's continue with the merge fields in the advanced word export template. Compared to the simpler word export, we have to apply a different syntax, and instead of item we use the init prefix, or if we renamed it, then we have to use the rename one, of course. Furthermore, if we want to refer a level that has dependency on another level or levels, then we have to indicate this in the merge field syntax. For example, if L2 depends on L1 that also depends on init, then the syntax will be the following: init.l1.l2. For example, name. Similarly to the merge fields, we use init instead of item in the bookmark loops as well. For example, the main bookmark loop is loop_init in an advanced word export template. The multi-level dependency has to be indicated in the bookmark loop as well. For example, again, if L2 depends on L1, that also depends on init, then the syntax will be the following: loop_init_L1_L2. As you can see, the dependency is indicated from the left to the right. And based on the dependencies, the bookmark loops need to be nested. See the diagram at the bottom of the slide. And after the theory, let's get to the practice. In the following exercise, I'm going to build an advanced word export template from the scratch. To make it more meaningful, I will create a template from the use case 2 that we already reviewed earlier. Let's recap on that quickly. In this case, we want to export all epics, user stories, test runs, and bugs that are assigned to the selected release into one single Word document. Accordingly, the export will be initiated from the given release item, and Codebeamer will put the content from the different trackers based on the links between the release in question and the other items. You already seen a conceptual diagram about the structure of the advanced word export template for use case 2, and now let's review how it's being built up step by step. First, we define the template parameters. For this purpose, we'll use queries. Once these are ready, we can start to build the actual body of the template. First, we will add the initial level. This will represent the release data. Within the corresponding loop_init bookmark, we insert two placeholders, one for the name and another for the end date attribute, because we would like to get this information from the release in Codebeamer. Then we would like to insert the content of the epics. Remember the setup: epics are linked to the release, in other words, they depend on the release. Accordingly, the epic level will be nested into the init level, and the corresponding bookmarks and merge fields will indicate that dependency init.l1. As next step, I'm inserting the level of the user stories. That will be L2. Since they depend on epics, there will be an additional nesting within L1, and as you can see, the multi-level dependencies, user requirements on epics, epics on release, is represented in the syntax init.l1.l2. Last but not least, I'm incorporating the level 3 for test runs and level 4 for bugs. As they are dependent on release directly, they will get nested into the init loop as the epic level. Okay, now it's time to switch over to Codebeamer and check what are the actual contents that we would like to export into Word. As you can see, this is my demo project I created for this advanced word export presentation. And within the project, we have two releases. And let's say we would like to export the content that relates to the first release, Multimedia Navigation Release 1. So this is going to be the initial item for our export. So we will initiate the export process from here. Then we have the epics tracker in this project, and you can see that within this tracker, we have two epics. Actually, these are closed, and my intention that I would like to export only the completed closed items into this word export. So for that purpose, I will apply filters in the word export template as well. And as you can see, I already filtered on the closed epics in this view. You can see that we have two epics as mentioned, and the two epics have downstream references. Actually, these are user stories that we also would like to export into the document. And then we have the test runs tracker. Again, these are assigned to releases, and as you can see, the majority of these test run items are assigned to our release, multimedia navigation release 1, and there is only one test run that's assigned to sprint 1.2. This is not gonna be exported into our document, but the rest will be. And last but not least, we have the bugs tracker. If you remember, this is the last tracker where we would like to export content from. And as you can see, these bugs are already resolved, and all of these bugs are assigned to the multimedia navigation release 1 again. So this should be part of the export. So this is going to be our expectation. And now let's go to a blank Word export. As I mentioned, as I promised, I will build this advanced Word export template for this use case from the scratch. And let's start the work then. First of all, if you remember the step-by-step guide a few minutes ago, we will start with the definition of the parameters for the template. So first of all, I will insert a page break because, as I mentioned, usually we put these parameters at the end of the document, and during the export in the output, in the final document, those parameters will be hidden. But first, let's insert a new page and let's start to work on the parameters. As I mentioned, the parameters are defined in form of content control fields, and these fields, content control fields, are organized into different tables. But I will not write this from the scratch. Instead of that, we will use a template. I call it parameters template. That's going to be available in the description of this Academy video, so you can download that template. And let me switch to that template. This is the parameters template. This is what you can use when you would like to build an advanced Word export template. Before I would copy the content this over to my actual new Word export template, let's quickly review what is in this template. As I mentioned, in the parameter sections, you can define different levels. So we will define the initial level, that's here. And for that level, we have this table and we have the additional levels. For example, L1 is defined with this table. Let's check what we have in these tables. So if I click on the init, you will see that this is actually a content control field. This is what I mentioned. So instead of creating these tables manually, I will just simply copy this content over, and this is a query. So Codebeamer will interpret the content of these content control fields. So this is the description, this is the query name, and this is the query CPQL definition. This is what we will use to filter on the exact source of the given level. So let me copy over some of these tables. So let's copy over maybe 5 levels and we will see how many we will need. Actually, I know the answer, but let's do this way. I will go back to my document and I will insert the copied section. Okay, and now I'm going back to the top of this parameter section. And the first thing that we want to define is the init level. And as I mentioned earlier, it can be really helpful if you define the description, because later if you would like to update the template, your template or someone else's template, then probably you would need some information what actually this level is. So if you remember, the first initial level will be the selected release. So I will call it selected release. And I will keep the default, naming for the init level, initial level, and that's gonna be the init. Again, this is a best practice, so it's much easier to understand each other's template if it's coming to a collaboration. or if you need some help from a solution engineering team of Intland. But again, you can rename this, but remember, if you rename the init, then you have to reflect that change in other references as well. So I will keep this for now, and let's go to the important part. So defining the CBQL formula that will actually determine the source of the initial level. So I will insert here a formula, and just to save some time, I will copy this from my notes and I will explain what this actually means. Please be aware that you are copying the content within this content control field. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, so if you copy outside of this field, then the export will not work. You will receive an error message. In the meantime, I've inserted the CBQL formula I would like to use for the initial level. And as you can see, based on this formula, we want to select a release item within the demo project. This is the definition. And within the demo project, we would like to limit the selection for the release tracker. So, okay, you're selecting the release, but that can be only in the releases tracker. So imagine if you, in this case, if you have multiple release trackers for some reason, then you would like to, limit, okay, I would like to work with this template only for these releases. And the last part of this formula is about selecting an item. So this is a dynamic variable. That means that you can select any release item within this tracker, and you can run the template for each of these items. The other way, as I explained earlier in the presentation, you can hard code, okay, item ID equals to a concrete ID value. And in this case, the template will work only with that item, or if you define multiple items, then the template will run on multiple items as init item. Okay, I will keep the reviews checkbox selected, but it's not going to be relevant for this use case, and I will keep the default value for the limit part. Okay, now we defined the first level. And now let's jump to the level 1. If you remember, and let me go back a little bit to my slide, level 1 will be the epics level. So in this case, I will, and remember my intention that I would like to export only the closed epics. So I will give this description just to remind myself, okay, L1 is for closed epics. I will leave again the original naming, so L1 will be referred as L1. And you can see that in this case, on the additional levels tables, we have this additional row depends on, and this will determine, the dependency. And as I mentioned earlier, epics are downstream references of the release, so they depend on the release. In this case, init represent the release, and that's the reason why we enter. So this is actually a default thing, when you define additional levels. So we will keep the init because, L1 epics depend on init. In the next rows, we can select, okay, which relations should be taken into account when Codebeamer will identify these dependent items. And you can see that by default, the incoming references and outgoing references, so the downstream references and upstream references are selected. And I will keep the selections because, as we recommend, we don't really build traceability and associations, but you might have association as well. So if you would like to take that approach, then you can work with association as well when it comes to word export generation. Okay, so I will skip these rows, and now I will go again to the CBQL row, and I will define the source of the L1. As I mentioned, I would like to export the closed epics from that project. Again, I will copy this formula from my notes just to speed up a little bit this exercise. But again, I will explain the meaning of those formulas. As you can see, again, I'm filtering on the project in question that didn't change, and what I change is the name of the tracker that I'm referring, because I would like to export epics, and those are stored in the epics code tracker. And I'm extending this definition, CBK definition, with an AND operator that will determine that, okay, I would like to export the epics, but only those epics where the work item status is closed. So that's defined here. Imagine if you have different use cases, of course. So if you would like to assign something, items assigned to a specific user role, for example, you can filter by roles, you can filter by type, and so on and so on. For example, if you would like to skip folders, then you can exclude the folder type items as well. That's a good way, for example. Again, I will keep the query limit because I have a simple example in this case, so I don't need to touch these limits. Please remember that the hard limit is 200. Okay, and now let me go further, and now we will define L2. And again, I'm going back to our slide just to recap what we want to accomplish here. And L2 will be the user stories. And as you can see, as I mentioned, user stories are downstream references of epics, and epics are downstream references of releases. So this is going to be a multiple dependency. So we have to nest the L2 into L1, and we have to represent this, we have to indicate this in the queries, in the parameter queries. So I'm going back to my Word template. Again, I will add some meaningful closed user stories. I will keep the original naming L2 for L2, and as you can see, in this case, L2 will depend on L1. Yeah, from the template is coming automatically. I mean the correct value. But for example, imagine if you would have init here, then we have to modify that to L1 because, and that's a good opportunity to show you this thing. So when I entered L1, the first character became a capital letter. So you have to correct this just to make sure that the export will work correctly. And now we have the dependency that L2's user stories depends on L1 on epics. This is what we wanted. Again, I will keep the reference selections because I would like to get, and usually we don't change it, but if you want to very specific, okay, for this dependency, we want to work only with the downstream references or only with the upstream references, then accordingly, you can remove the appropriate selection from one of the checkboxes. And now let me go to the CBK definition again. And in this case, we want to define, okay, we want to get the items from the project user stories tracker. And again, those items should be in closed status. And for that purpose, again, I will copy this formula from my notes just to avoid typos. Good. You can see again that I'm filtering the same project and I'm filtering different trackers. This time that's the user stories. And again, I'm using the same filtering for the work item status. And one thing I haven't mentioned so far. So when you define this CB formulas, then I would strongly recommend to cross-check in Codebeamer that these formulas are correct. So to do that, I will copy this expression. I will go back to Codebeamer and I will create a new report. And within the report, I will switch to the expert mode and I will insert my formula and I'm trying to run it. And if everything goes well, then this query should give back the expected result. And yes, we are good because we are seeing now the user stories and the closed user stories from the desired project, from the desired tracker. we are good. So you can do, and as I mentioned, I strongly recommend to do this cross-check, because that will verify that, okay, the format that you entered will work and the process will not break. Okay, let's step forward. L3 is gonna be the test runs. And the test runs will depend again on the release. So in this case, we don't need to have further nesting within L1. So as you can see, L3 will depend on init. I'm not changing this because this is correct. What I change is again only the filtering, the CB definition. Okay, this is ready. I will not explain again what this means because that's pretty straightforward. And then the final level, it's going to be the bugs. So if I go back, you can see that's going to be the final level for the bugs, L4. We solved bugs. And now I will copy again the query that I would like to use. Perfect. Again, I would recommend always to check if you didn't remove a content control field, you are copied the right things into the right position. For example, okay, we are in L4 and this query for L4, so this is correct. So if I switch back to the L3, you will see that this is L3. Okay, it belongs to L3, so this is correct. So sometimes it happens if you copy not in the right way, then these content control fields will be also copied over to the cells, so you might mess up a few things. Okay, so we are ready with the definitions, and if I scroll down, you will see that we have an additional level, L5, that I copied over from the template, but I don't need that. So the best way to remove this, because otherwise you can confuse the export process, because it will look for F5 and it's not going to be available, it's not going to be defined, and that's going to generate an error. So I will simply remove this table with the content control fields, and that's done. And last but not least, I will go back to the parameters template, because this template includes 21 levels, so you can build a pretty big template. What I would like to copy over as additional things are the debug options, rendering parameters, logging configurations, because this can be helpful. Okay, and now I copy this over. You can see that selecting these checkboxes, you can instruct Codebeamer to convert wiki fields, for example. But what is really important is the last part, rendering parameters. In this case, you can select the checkbox, remove rendering parameters. This will allow you to hide and remove this parameter section from the document, because of course you don't need this kind of tables into your final document. So you have to keep this checkbox selected. And I'm using this replace empty string option, because if something is empty in the final document, then probably I need to understand why it's empty. Is my definition incorrect, or it's only because the value in Codebeamer is empty and there is nothing to export? In this case, the empty value will be replaced with this n/a expression, and it's much easier to understand, okay, why. But that was the content, the output of the export process. Okay, we are ready with the definition of the parameters and the queries. And the last thing I will do before get to the body, that we have to include this section, these parameter sections, into a bookmark loop. And so I will, of course, I will enable this option just to see where we are. I will hit an enter, and I will select everything regarding parameters, and now I will insert the bookmark. That's going to be the first bookmark. in this template, and it's gonna be called template parameters, and we have to definitely add this, otherwise it's not gonna work. Okay, we are done with the parameters part, and now we can start the build of the actual content of the template. First of all, I will create a simple cover page on which I would like to put two informations: the name of the project I'm exporting from and the release, which is the subject of the actual export. So I will do some formatting step on the cover page, and I will insert a merge field, and to pull the name of the project, I will simply use the project.name merge field, which is a global parameter independent from the item or the init level. So this project information is always available regardless if you're using a simpler or an advanced word export. So I will call this one, and underneath that I would like to insert the release name. So I will insert a second merge field, and it's gonna be called init.name, because we are initiating the export from the release item. So that's gonna be the init, and we need the name information, the name attribute of that. And that's it. I will use some formatting on that, so I will make it as a title, and I will position in the center. And now I will insert a new page break, because we would like to start to build the actual content. Yes, and let's say into the first chapter we would like to pull the epics and the related user stories. So let's call it epics and user stories. Into the second chapter I will have the test runs, and into the last chapter let's pull the bugs. And we use for them the header 1 styling, okay, and within the epics now we can start to incorporate the related merge fields and bookmarks. So first of all, within this chapter we would like to get the epics, and if you remember, the epics were referred with the L1, so we have to put this information accordingly. So I will insert again merge fields. Remember, so epics depends on the init level, which is the release, and we will refer the epics with L1, and first I will need the name of the epic. And underneath that, let's say I need, you know, the name, the description of the epic. So again, I will insert a new merge field, and this time it's going to be the description. Okay, and now I will use a different styling, because that's going to be heading 2. And, you know, within the description, within the epic, I would like to insert the related user stories. So that's going to be an additional level. So let's go forward and let's insert the new level of the content. That's going to be init.l1, because we are relying on the epic level, which is L1, and that's going to be L2, and again we would require the name of the user story and the description of the actual user story. And now let's repeat the same procedure, but this time I will need the description, of course. Okay, I will apply again a new heading styling. Nope, sorry, that's gonna be level 3, heading 3. And now we have to incorporate the bookmarks, because we have to iterate this information, this export for each item, because we have multiple epics and we have multiple user stories within an epic. So first of all, what I need to do, I have to define the loop for the level 1. And remember, L2 depends on level 1, so this L2 level needs to be within the loop of L1. So if I go back to the slide, then it's going to be much easier to understand what I meant. So I'm planning to insert the loop bookmark for the L1 level and another bookmark for the L2 level, which is going to be nested within the L1. So this is what we want to accomplish within the actual template. So I'm going back to that. First of all, let me insert a line break. And now we will insert the first loop for level 1. Remember that needs to include L2 as well. Let me select this content, and now I'm inserting that bookmark. That's going to be loop init L1. Now I've inserted this completely. And now I have to insert within this L1 the second L2 bookmark. And I will select, in this case, only the user stories part, because L2 is relevant for the user stories. Remember from the previous lessons, from the basics, you have to separate, the ending of the bookmarks, otherwise you can encounter errors during the export. So that's the reason why I'm entering some space. And now I'm selecting the user stories related part, and I will insert the corresponding bookmark, and that's gonna be loop init underscore L1 underscore L2, because this is a nested bookmark. And we are done with the first chapter, so epics and user stories will be exported into these sections. We will have 2 epics, and within each epic you will have their own user stories listed in this chapter. And now let's continue with the test runs. In the second chapter, I will use a little bit different format. So let's say I would like to export the test runs information into a table that includes the name, the test run time, the completion time, and the actual result of the test run items. So first of all, I will insert the table. So that will require 3 columns and 2 rows, because in the first one I have to insert the headers. It's going to be the test run name. The second will be the test run time. And to the last one, I would like to insert the result of the actual test runs. And now into the second row, I have to insert, of course, the placeholders, the merge fields that will pull the information into the corresponding place within the table. So as you remember, test runs were referred as L3 within the parameters. So I will again use the same approach. Since test runs depend directly on the release, so L3 will depend on init. And now I will first the name of the test run, then I will need the close date, the close time of the test run, init.L3 again, and closed at. That's going to be the attribute accessing this information. And last but not least, I have to insert the result of the actual test run. And let's say I would like to do it this way, and the result field will be simply referred with the result attribute within this merge field. And now we are ready with this table that we imagined for this chapter. I will do some formatting adjustment. I would like to have smaller letters in the table, of course. Good. And let's say I don't want to have them bold into the content part. And before I forget, of course, I have to insert the bookmark for this level as well. So as I mentioned, test runs I feel depends directly on init. So accordingly, I have to insert the bookmark following this approach. So I will go back to the init level, and that's going to be init L3. And as you could see, as you learned in the previous basic session, if you select an entire row and insert a bookmark on that, then the export will iterate the number of the rows in alignment with the number of the items. So if you have 5 test run items, then you will have 5 rows in this table. And we are done with this chapter. Let's continue with the bugs. Okay, let's say I would like to export the bug items in a similar format, but not completely with the same table format. I'm gonna insert the table after the bugs chapter. Then let's find it. Okay, that's gonna be 1x3 table, because into the first cell I would like to get the name of the bug, into the second I would like to get the ID of the bug, and last but not least I would like to know when the bug was reported, and that information is gonna go into the last position. So let's insert the corresponding merge field. If you can remember, bugs was referred in the parameters as L4. Again, that was depending on init directly. So I will use the same approach. I will get the name. Then I will need the ID of the bug, and I will need submission date, and for this chapter I will need only these 3 parameters. And now we have to insert the corresponding bookmark, but before that let's do some formatting thing again. I need a little bit smaller letters. Good. And one thing that I would like to get the actual bugs represented in the table of contents. So I will apply a heading for this bug name line. So that's gonna be heading 2. And you can see this, it will automatically receive this numbering that I'm expecting in the table of contents. And now we can insert the corresponding bookmark for L4. So I will insert a line break before the table and a line break after the table, because I would like to get this format for each bug item. So I will ensure the separation of those items this way. And now let me select the relevant part of the document, and now I will insert again the last bookmark into this template. Actually not the last one, and that's gonna be L4. Okay, now it's added, and now we are done with the actual body. And there is one missing thing, one last missing thing I would say, that we have to insert, because otherwise it's not gonna work. So if I go back to the slides, we can review what was added already and what is missing. As you remember, we inserted the bookmarks for the L1, L2, L4 and L3 levels. And now we have to add the big bookmark for the initial level, and that's going to be the loop_init. But we have to pay attention that that loop_init bookmark will not have overlap with the template parameters, because that can generate issues during the export process. So now I'm going back to the template file, and now I will select the entire body of the template, so the content. You can see that now I selected everything, and now I'm ready to add the loop_init bookmark, and now it is done, and now I can save the template and I can use it for export. So let's go back to Codebeamer and let's initiate that export. As we learned, we are initiating the export process from the init level. In our case, that's the release that we selected. So I already open up the release item view. I will open up the more menu and select export to Office. Within this window, I would like to export the content as a Microsoft Word. So I will keep this selection. And what I have to select, because within the init parameter, I defined a dynamic variable that I have to select what's going to be the actual init item. And this is something that you can select within the configuration item selection field. I will open up that. I will search for the name quickly. Now I found it. Yes, this is the multimedia navigation release 1. This is where I would like to initiate the export. Now I've added it, I selected it, and now I have to select the file, the template file that we built together. Now you selected, and now we are ready to start the export. And this is what I'm doing right now. As you can see in the top bottom corner, and the export process started, and Codebeamer will notify you once the process has completed. So we have to wait a few seconds. Okay, here we go. Now I can download the export. Good. And now I will open up what was the export. It has opened on my other window, so I have to pull it over so you can see it. You can see that we exported the name of the project. Fine, we exported the name of the release. Yes, this is what we were expecting. And as you can see, we have the epics and user stories chapter, which includes the epics, the audio playback. And underneath that, you can see the related user stories, so audio playback from SD card. You can see the acceptance criteria and the description. And if I scroll down until the chapter 2, then we will see that the test runs has been exported in the expected format. So we have the test name, test run time, and the result. And if I scroll further, then you can see that bugs has been exported in a separate tables. So this is what we actually expected from this export. So let me insert a new page here. And on that one, I will insert a table of content so you can quickly review what is the actual structure that we produced. And you can see that we have chapter 1. Underneath that, on the second level, on heading 2, we have the epics, and underneath that we have the user stories, and we have chapter 4 test runs, and we have the bugs, where each bug has its own numbering. Before we finish the training, let me have a few words about the common issues in advanced word export templates. The first one, if you have inconsistent merge fields and bookmarks in the template. In this case, Codebeamer will notify you in form of an error message in the output file. The other common issue when the output file contains blank merge fields. This can have multiple causes. For example, an incorrectly defined CBQL query. As we learned earlier, the correctness of the CBQL can be validated in the expert mode of the reporting function. The other potential cause of a blank merge field if the dependency that you would like to use in the template is not existing in Codebeamer. For example, the up and downstream reference is not set between 2 or multiple items. Using the traceability browser, you can easily verify this. And now we reach the end of our course. Thank you for your attention.